Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, Prince Automation Destination. This side Prince. I hope you are doing well. So today we are going to discuss about a challenge which almost every test automation engineer encounter while working in test automation. And this is one of the most widely asked interview question as well. Well, I'm going to talk about flaky test cases. So flaky test cases are like nightmare for any test automation engineer because writing scripts could be easy sometimes, but stabilizing them is always going to be the real challenge and is always going to be time taking. So without further delay, let me jump onto the discussion and discuss about how we can identify flaky test cases in BDD Cucumber with TestNG framework. So what are flaky test cases? Test cases which when executed produces inconsistent result. What does inconsistent means? So suppose we are executing it today. So it may pass today, but when we execute it tomorrow, it may give failure. And again, on the next day, it may give a pass result. So it gives an inconsistent result and it loses the confidence as well, meaning the testing team loses the confidence into the automation suite. And as a result, customer will also lose the confidence. So we need to identify such cases and we need to act upon them to fix them, right? So what are the common causes of flaky test cases? So the first thing is timing issues. Sometimes because of inadequate weights implemented in the test automation scripts or the race conditions within the application or synchronization problems within the test steps, we get the flaky test cases. Then comes the network dependencies. The application that we are interacting with may have interaction with external APIs, which could be slow. They may have database connections or third-party integration, which are quite unreliable or slow. So because of this also, we get the flaky test cases. Then comes the test data issues. So if we are working on some test automation suite, so we may be using shared test data, which multiple teams are using, or we are not doing the proper cleanup at the end of the execution, or we are using our data, which is coming from the external sources, and that may not be generated properly, right? So these are some of the flaky test cases reasons, right? So now how to identify it, right? For that purpose, we should have a strategy. First thing is we need to identify the pattern. So how we can identify the pattern? So we need to run the same test case multiple times so that we can identify when it is failing. Also, we can run it during the different time, right? Then we can analyze the results of pass and fail, when it is passing, when it is failing, right? And then we can document the pattern, right? Now talking about the implementation, as we are using Cucumber with TestNG, so our runner would be extending abstract TestNG Cucumber test. And what we are going to do is we are simply going to override the run scenario method of abstract TestNG Cucumber test. So this particular run scenario is responsible for converting the Cucumber scenario into TestNG. And what we are going to do is we are simply going to override it into the test runner, and here we are going to write the logic where we are going to define the rerun count equal to 2, and we are going to write a for loop. So because of this, what will happen is we'll be executing the same test case multiple times irrespective of failure, right? For failure, we can use retry analyzer as well. If you want to check out that, you can check out my video in icon. But this one is to rerun the same test case multiple times, right? Now, what are the best practices for flaky test cases identification? So we should run it multiple times. We should run it against different test environments. We should execute it against different time intervals, meaning daytime, evening time, night time, right? Then we may use different data sets. And after execution, we should monitor the logs. So that's why logging is always important. So we should have screenshots so we can check the screenshots as well for failure, right? So these are some of the best practices to identify the flaky test cases, right? Now, once we have identified these flaky test cases, we should come up with some strategy to act upon them. So we can implement retry mechanism if environment is unstable. So at that point of time, we can use retry. Otherwise, we should always get the environment stable from the development, right? Then there could be another things like where we can introduce properly, right? And we can fix it, right? Because if we will be able to fix the flaky test cases, it will give the confidence to the customer, right? So now let us jump onto the practical demonstration. For that purpose, I'm going to this particular Cucumber-based TestNG framework. Let me quickly explain it. This is the Maven-based test automation framework. So if I open pom.xml, it has several dependencies, right? Cucumber dependency, then Selenium 4.19, Cucumber TestNG for Cucumber integration with TestNG, right? Okay. And chain test also. Chain test is something which is successor of extend report. In case you want to check more on what is chain test report and how to integrate chain test report in test automation framework, you can check out the same in icon, but this is not the topic of discussion for the current discussion, right? Then once we have created the Maven project, so we will have src main and src test. So in src main Java, what I have done is I don't have any code in src main Java, so let us close it. Under src test Java, what I have done is I have created dependency injection for Pico container to share the context between the different steps. Then I have created a driver package where I have written browser manager, right? So I have written Chrome manager and then Firefox manager to deal with two type of browsers. Then I have written one driver factory, right? So this is driver manager. So based on the browser type, we are going to create Chrome manager or Firefox manager. If it is Chrome, then we are going to create Chrome manager, otherwise Firefox manager. So they will be taking care of the Chrome and Firefox. Then we have implemented some fail test cases using retry analyzer, right? You can check out the same in icon as well. So in Cucumber, there is a concept of hooks as well. Hooks are like annotations in TestNG before and after. So this will execute before every scenario. So here what we have done is we are initializing the driver, right? Create driver.getInstance.set driver. So within here itself in driver manager, we have a create driver class as well, right? Which is following singleton design pattern along with thread safety for the Erlang execution, right? So what we are doing, if I come here and hooks, right? So we are making create driver.getInstance.set driver. So because of this, what will happen is it will create a single instance of Chrome driver, which will be used throughout the execution. And for thread safety purpose, what we have done is we have implemented thread local. In case you want to understand more on what is thread safe singleton WebDriver and can be used singleton for parallel execution, you can check out my video in icon, right? Then corresponding to this before, we have after as well, which will execute after each scenario, right? So here we have written that whether we want to take a screenshot on failure or not, right? So this is what is written, right? Now, this is something related to multiple user file execution, right? In case we have a requirement, but this is not, this is out of scope for current discussion. Then I have created pages as I'm going to execute a sample test case against source demo. So I have a login page where I have a username, password, login button, and then I have a dashboard where I have products page or products tab, and then we have source labs backpack. I can show you the same. Let me open the application. So this is sourcedemo.com. This is the login page, right? And the credentials is given here itself. So we can go inside this, right? So here we have products that we can verify, and we have this particular product as well, right? So this is where I have created two pages, right? Then we have runner section. Here I have multiple runners, but the one that we're going to talk about is UI TestNG runner, right? UI tester TestNG. So what we are doing is we have created this particular class, and it is extending abstract TestNG Cucumber test. We will soon come to this, right? Now this is something related to like Amazon interview question, right? So here we have a step defs as well, right? But before discussing about step def, let us expand SRC test resources, because in Cucumber, how do we write test cases? We write the test cases in the form of feature file, and inside feature file, we define the scenario. One scenario is like a one test case, right? So here I have written, as a user of application, I want to identify Flakiness, right? So we are going to validate the login functionality where we are launching the application, we are entering the credential, we are clicking on login, and we are verifying the products, right? Now, corresponding to these Gherkin steps, we have a step defs, right? So we have a login step def where login related code is written. Then we have a dashboard step def where dashboard related code is written, right? Similarly, we have add to cart, right? That we are not going to use. Remove from cart step def, right? But we are not going to use all these, right? We are just going to simply log into the application and we are going to verify products, right? Now let us come to the original discussion, right? Suppose, for example, this is the test runner. Now it is extending abstract TestNG cucumber test for the integration of cucumber scenario in the form of TestNG. So if I go inside this, you will find a before class, a test method. So this is similar to TestNG at the rate test notation. So what it is doing internally is it is transforming the cucumber scenario in the form of at the rate test cases, right? So that TestNG can execute it, because TestNG is the null that we are utilizing, right? Now, suppose we are executing this particular test case, right? And this particular test case, let us say, passes today and fails tomorrow, and the next day it starts passing again, right? So what we need to do, we may need to rerun these test cases. We may need to rerun this particular test case to identify the pattern. First of all, let us execute it, right? So how we can execute it? I'm going to copy this particular tag and going to this particular runner, and here we are going to provide the tag, right? Now if I'll execute, it will simply pass. So it will launch the application in Chrome browser, and then it will log into the application and will verify products, right? So it has launched Chrome, then it has launched source demo, it is entering the credentials, and then will be logging into the application, will be verifying products, and then the driver will be quitted and the browser will be closed, right? So this is how it is working. So if I show you the report, let me go to target, right? And this is the report, right? So if I want to open, I can click on any browser and it will open the report. So you see, there is one test case, right, which got executed. I have a test screenshot on every step irrespective of failure, right? So this is how this particular framework is designed, right? Now, for example, this particular test start failing tomorrow, right? So for example, though it is a stable test case, so suppose it start failing tomorrow, right? So it false is there, yes. So what we can do is I can rerun it, right? Let us say, and suppose now it is giving a failure. I have explicitly made it failure, but in real time, suppose this is going to be the real failure, right? And suppose this particular test case is an inconsistent test case or a flaky test cases, which is giving sometimes pass result and sometimes giving fail result, right? Okay, so this particular test case will fail. So you see, it got failed, right? Let me revert it. Okay. Now, how we can identify that this particular test case is, when this particular test case will pass and when this particular test case will fail. So for that purpose, what we can do is, one way is we will have to rerun these test cases. How we can rerun this? So one way is we may copy this, right? But this solution is not the optimized solution. First of all, we need to copy the same test case again and again. And if we are going to do it in CI, we will have to make the commits into the Git repository or whatever the repository that you are using, right? So this is not the optimized approach. So what is the other way by which we can rerun the same test case? Because we want to identify the pattern. So for that purpose, we need to rerun this particular test case. So what I'm going to do is, I'll be going to UI test runner, right? And as I just mentioned, in abstract TestNG cucumber test, we have a run scenario method, which is responsible to convert the cucumber scenario in the form of TestNG, right? So whenever the test case execution starts, the control comes here, right? So what I'm going to do is, within the UI test runner, right, I'm going to right click, right, and go to generate and go to override method. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to override the abstract TestNG cucumber tests run scenario method, right? So I'm going to click OK, right? And as a result, it will override this, right? So what it is simply doing is, it is simply calling the same run scenario using the super. But what I'm going to implement a condition here, int retry count, right? And let us define it as 2, right? Then let us create a for loop, int I equal to 1, right? I less than equal to 2, right? I plus plus, right? And instead of calling the super.run outside, I'll simply move this inside this, right? Now, because of this, what will happen is, first of all, instead of 2, I'll simply replace with this, right? Because we want to rerun this particular test case or any test case, whatever we have provided here. We want this test cases to be run as many times we are defining in the retry count parameter. In the real time, we can configure it from the properties, but for the demonstration purpose, I have just hard coded, right? Now, what I'm going to do, I'm simply going to execute this particular test case, and you will notice that the same test case is executing multiple times. So when this same test case will execute multiple times, so in some of the scenario or in some of the execution, it may fail. For example, we are trying to execute it 5 times. So we may encounter the failure pattern, that at which point it is failing and what is the cause, right? So this is how we can rerun the same test case to identify the pattern of the flaky test cases. So you see, it has executed once. Now it is going to execute the same test case again, right? So you see, it has launched the Chrome browser again, and it is going to enter the credentials, and again it is going to execute the same test case. I'm going to show you the report as well. So you see, it has executed the same test case 2 times, right? And if I, for example, go to report, right? So I will see that the same test case executed 2 times, right? Okay. So this is how we can utilize this particular behavior of this particular cucumber with TestNG to rerun this particular test case as many times we want, so that we can identify the failure pattern. Because if, for example, we will execute the same test case 10 times, we will definitely encounter a failure. And this will help us debug this particular flaky test case, and we will be able to fix it, right? By introducing some weights, by making some changes in the code, right? So this is what I wanted to cover, guys. Thank you for watching. I would request you to please like, share, subscribe. Thank you once again.